Yo, 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 what up? It's your boy Rob coming back at you once again with another live stream. What's up? I see my man Help Me is in here early. What's good with you, bro? Good to see you. Let's get this discussion cracking. So, I don't know if you guys were in my video yesterday, but I want to tell everybody Happy Independence Day. But in me telling you Happy Independence Day, I have to ask you the question: are you really independent? Are you independent or are you dependent? And if you're dependent, are you dependent on what? What people don't understand is that there's many wars being waged right now. Some people believe that there's a race war. Some people believe that there's a war between good and evil. Some people believe that there's a war of spirituality between the flesh and the mind. One war that I know for sure that's going on is the war on your brain. There's been a psychological war on the United States population going back as far as the 1950s. And if we talk about slavery here in the United States, the way that it affected Black people, we can say it went back farther than that. Now I'm going to show you an example of this, because the thing is that they're silent weapons for quiet wars. And that may sound familiar. And the reason why that sounds familiar is because it's a book that I've been telling people that they need to read forever. So we all know about these many different agendas, and everybody's seen the Lil Nas X performance. And my question is, how does everybody feel about it? What did you think initially when you saw it? Were you outraged? Were you repulsed? Were you empowered? How did you feel? What did you think about? What thoughts ran through your mind? What images did you see? Who did you hear talking when you heard the voices that made up your thoughts? A lot of times, most people aren't even capable of going into that deep area of their brain and even paying attention to those kind of things. But what's important is that that exists. And another thing that's important is that if you remember from yesterday, the 80-20 principle, it's the minority that controls the majority. So that means if there's unseen elements, residual thoughts that remain from a message, it's that minority of residual thought that causes the greatest influence. That's one of the things that the United States government did when they studied using MK Ultra. So let's actually get into that and let's actually talk about it, because there's many people out here who actually think that this is just conspiracy theory. Our government would never do something like that to us because they care. They're here to protect us. Is that what you think? If you believe that the government is here to protect you, then I have to ask you the question, why would the Second Amendment exist? Why would the government write in a built-in security system for people to protect itself from the government? Because every government knows that with every organization, as it grows, ultimately, corruption is almost an inevitable element. So we'll take a look briefly at MK Ultra. And as we read about MK Ultra, one of the things that I want to ask is that, does any of this sound familiar? Have you encountered anything like this? Have you been bombarded with messages? Have you had thoughts in your head that you don't know where they came from? Have you seen an image and had a desire for something? More than likely, the answer to all of those questions is yes. Do you understand it? The likely answer to that question is no. Project MK Ultra. Project MK Ultra is the code name given to a program of experiments on human subjects that were designed and undertaken by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, some of which were illegal. I'm going to repeat that. Project MK Ultra is the code name given to a program of experiments on humans They were designed and undertaken by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, some of which were illegal. Now, if you recall, I constantly talk about how we live under a system of illegitimacy. But wait a minute. How do we live under a system of illegitimacy when our government is supposed to protect us? Our government protects us? Is that what MK Ultra sounds like? Does that sound like protection? That's a strange way to protect somebody, to invade their mind when they're not aware of it. But that's what the United States government does. The United States government is supposed to prosecute criminals. But when it comes to MK Ultra, it appears that the United States government was the criminal. Was there anybody ever prosecuted as a result of this? What were the effects on the public? Was anybody ever given any restitution for this? More than likely not. As usual, with everything, most likely this was swept under the rug. Now you have to ask yourself the question, are things like this still going on today? Because that's always the question. How does anything affect anybody that's alive today? Well, these people who were in the FBI and the CIA back in this day, well, nowadays, they're the people who run the media companies. They're CEOs of Hollywood companies. And if you think that they didn't take this information and transfer it into the industry, then you must not be thinking at all. My man Zip is in the house. What's good, bro? Melanin Magdalene says, billions go into keeping down the undesirables. They don't use the N-word no more. Absolutely. Which is one of the reasons why it's kind of erroneous for us to continue calling this, quote, system white supremacy. The same way that white supremacy evolves, we need to evolve. Those who don't evolve and those who don't adapt cease to exist. I don't know about you, but for the most part, 90% of the time, I enjoy existing. What's up, Coco Fit? If I was as fit and in shape as my man Co-Kid Fit down there, I would enjoy existing a lot more. Maybe one of these days I'll get back to the form like that. So when we talk about undesirables, since Melanin Magdalene brought that up, you have to look into these agendas. The United States had a whole eugenics agenda. Are you guys familiar with eugenics? Undesirables, something that's talked about in the bell curve. Those are the people at the bottom of the socioeconomic class who allegedly have a genetically low IQ, who also, coincidentally, genetically have melanin in their skin. But we're outraged about critical race theories that don't actually talk about races. They talk about the way class and structure was created here in the United States. It's very interesting what we choose to be outraged about. Do you think that choice to be outraged about certain things comes from a source? What source does that come from? Do you think that we're being trained every day? More than likely, yes. Why? Because we sit down and watch programming. We go to school every day and get programming. We follow a routine. Your brain has a thing that's called a schema. A schema is a mental map that maps out tasks and allows you to complete them in a more efficient way. You don't think that the government hacks into that? You don't think that's one of the things that they studied when they looked at MK Ultra? Where do you think marketing companies get their strategies from? You create a perceived need. I need a cell phone, do I? I need a car, do I? I need to eat fast food when I'm hungry, do I? I need a cigarette when I'm stressed out, do I? What do you actually need? We live in a society that's so diluted that our natural needs, the instincts that we have for them, have been completely dampened, which means that we've been programmed. There's some people who could survive longer on fast food and pop than they could survive on vegetables and water because of withdrawal. There's no gambling. There's no drugs. You don't see animals with addictions. But for some reason, people have been trained to routinely involve themselves with addictive substances. How does that happen? What does that do? What that does is it creates a market. If I create a perceived need and I convince you enough that you have to have it, it's a necessity, then guess what? You're going to continue to buy that product to fulfill that need that doesn't even exist. Have you ever experienced anything like that? Do you need to be watching YouTube right now? Or do you need to be breathing right now? Did you know that our senses have been so distorted that most times when we're thinking that we're hungry, we're actually thirsty? That's one of the reasons why obesity is such a problem here in the United States, because we don't even have the hunger reflex. We don't even have the thirst reflex. All we have is the want reflex. We just want something. I'm thirsty, so I'm going to eat. What kind of sense does that make? We live in an upside down, inside out, opposite and inverse reality. So what sense do we expect anything to make? What's the definition of something making sense? Making sense to who? Does it have to be consistent with the system of illegitimacy and the nonsensical rules that are set up here? What makes sense? Who told you that this makes sense? Who set up those guidelines? Who taught you that? Who programmed you that? Programming comes from all over. And if you think that the government doesn't have a hand in it, you're seriously mistaken. Experiments on humans were intended to develop procedures and identify drugs such as LSD to be used in interrogations in order to weaken the individual and force confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture. Is that going on here? Is that what happens when they put somebody in a jail? Is that what happens when someone is forced to work 80 hours a week to maintain their family? Is that what happens when you constantly bombard yourself with television and unhealthy messages? Have you ever been brainwashed? Have you ever been psychologically tortured? Psychological torture can come in many different forms. Have you ever experienced the pain and emotion when somebody dies? Is that psychological torture? Have you ever experienced anxiety? You weren't able to study for a test, but you had to take one. Is that psychological torture? Have you ever looked at things on TV, social media, and asked yourself, how come I can't get to this position? Is that psychological torture? Who's causing you to have that psychological torture? Because some psychological torture occurs naturally and others are induced. How is it induced? The same way you create a market, a perceived need. When you're constantly bombarded with unrealistic goals and unrealistic assets on social media, you begin to question your self-worth. Everybody has a Lamborghini. How come I don't have one? Everyone has a half-naked woman with big tits and a fat ass. How come I don't have one? Everybody's in a mansion in South Beach, Florida. How come I'm not there? Is that accurate? Is that viable? Or are you just torturing yourself? Who's causing you to torture yourself? Who's causing you to feel that those things are necessary? Could it be Facebook? Could it be Instagram? Oh, my bad. Those are the same company, and they work with the United States government. The project was organized through the Office of Scientific Intelligence of the CIA and coordinated with the United States Army's Biological Warfare Laboratories. Other code names for drugs related to this experiment were Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke. The operation was officially sanctioned in 1953, reduced in scope in 1964, and further curtailed in 1967. It was officially halted in 1973. The program also engaged in illegal activities, including the use of U.S. and Canadian citizens as its unwitting test subjects, which led to controversy regarding its legitimacy. Of course, there would be controversy regarding its legitimacy because we live in an illegitimate system with an illegitimate government that conducts illegitimate experiments on its population. This is what you pay taxes for. Those people in the 60s and 70s paid taxes to be subjects of a nationwide experiment. But we live under a legitimate system of government. We're supposed to obey these laws. We're supposed to obey laws that the people that enforce the laws don't even obey. Make it make sense. Does that make sense to you? Doesn't it sound like this government uses the laws that it says you aren't allowed to do to inflict pain and damage on you, to extract information from you? Melanin Magdalene says, yep, and the CIA-controlled media makes sure to keep the masses deluded. Absolutely. That's an excellent comment because it's 100% on point. Have you ever noticed that all of the media sounds the same? The news, the newspapers. It's like they all use a template and then they tweak certain things. But the message, once you get down to it and cut away all of the noise, is always the same. You're supposed to have a left wing and a right wing media, but they all said that Bill Cosby was guilty. You're supposed to have a left wing and a right wing media, but anytime they kill a black person, it's all good. They were resisting. How polarized is the media? How accurate is the media? How honest is the media? Does anybody know? I sure as hell don't. Former President Trump said that the media is fake news, and so did Malcolm X. Recently, the media said that Bill Cosby was guilty of rape. What Bill Cosby was guilty of was purchasing Quaaludes with the intent to use them. The media is dangerous, and it's a weapon of mass destruction because it destroys thousands of brains every day. So now here it says MK Ultra used numerous methods to manipulate its subjects, mental states, and brain functions. MK Ultra used numerous methods to manipulate its subjects, mental states, and brain functions. This sounds like buck breaking, doesn't it? Isn't that what happened to slaves? They buck broke them. So they modified that practice and used it on the entire population and called it MK Ultra. Let me ask you guys a question. You guys think that's still happening today? Funny. The same people that ask, how does this affect you today, are being affected by this today. There's no advantage in being delusional. Techniques included covert administration of high doses of psychoactive drugs, especially LSD, and other chemicals, electroshocks, hypnosis, sensory deprivation. We're moving into an era where it's going to be normal for people to use virtual reality to navigate through places. Isn't virtual reality and augmented reality a form of sensory deprivation? But they're going to normalize it soon. Psychoactive drugs have been normalized. Marijuana is legal. But they make you want it. You've been wanting to smoke weed so long, now you can. Marijuana is a psychoactive drug. It's a psychoactive substance. It's a psychoactive herb, whatever you want to call it. Regardless, allegedly, before it was illegal. Nowadays, it's legal. Isn't that interesting? Why? Why now? The government never does something on purpose. Am I saying marijuana is bad? No. I'm saying the government is bad. And I'm saying that if they're making something legal, more than likely it's something to benefit them and something to harm you. That's the point. The scope of Project MK Ultra was so broad, with activities carried out under the guise of research at more than 80 institutions, including colleges, universities, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. Universities are places where you're supposed to be learning. Do you think that you're learning, or are you being programmed, or are you being indoctrinated? What do you learn at a university? What about a hospital? At a prison, you're supposed to be reformed. What kind of reformation happens at a prison? Does any? Pharmaceutical companies are supposed to provide chemicals that help to maintain your health. What about your mental health? The CIA operated using front organizations, although sometimes top officials at these institutions were aware of the CIA's involvement. Front organizations, like what? Facebook, Bayer, Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, NBC, CNN, Fox. And guess what? Because the CIA is an intelligence agency, they have automatic immunity. Did you know that the CIA uses front companies? Who else uses front companies? Criminal organizations. Criminal organizations that use front companies can be prosecuted under the RICO statute. Has anybody prosecuted the CIA? No, because they're above the law. How is anybody above the law in a land where there's supposed to be checks and balances? When the government is illegitimate, laws don't apply equally. The CIA has a black budget, absolutely. Black budget funded by drug money. They have an income system with the CIA, with the Mexican cartels. They fund black projects. What's up, Saint? What's good, bro? Good back and forth yesterday, my man. Good to see you back. Project MK Ultra was first brought to the public's attention in 1975 by the Church Committee of the United States Congress and Gerald Ford's United States President's Commission on CIA Activities within the United States, also known as the Rockefeller Commission. Investigative efforts were hampered by the CIA director Richard Helms' order that all MK Ultra files be destroyed in 1973. Does the United States destroy files? Yes. Nothing changes. They just apply the techniques to different situations. The Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission investigations relied on the sworn testimony of direct participants and on the relatively small number of documents that survived Helms' destruction order. So much for transparency. So much for truth and justice. Why is the CIA allowed to behave this way? Why is the FBI allowed to behave this way? Why is your local police department allowed to behave this way? Because from the top down, the government is illegitimate. The government itself is organized crime. How do you think they became experts on what to and not to make illegal? Ghost, welcome back. It's good to see you, my man. It's foolish to think the CIA discontinued the MK Ultra project. They were and are tight with pharmaceutical companies on producing mind-controlling drugs. Also, the Rockefellers and elite among the elite are knee-deep in government lobbying. Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. There's an informative audio book on YouTube titled CIA as a Criminal Organization. It's worth checking out. I totally believe it. The CIA is basically the enforcement arm of the United States government, and they enforce it by any means necessary, regardless if they're legal or not. And they enforce many different things. They get information, they enforce violence, they move public agendas, and they also infiltrate other organizations like the media, like the video games, like the social media, like the schools. It's an intelligence agency, Central Intelligence Agency. They don't only collect intelligence for the government, but they keep track on how to affect the intelligence of the public. Central Intelligence Agency. A lot of times, these people will tell you exactly what's going on when you just listen to the name of the agency, or when you just listen to the words that they say, or you just listen to how they speak. The best form of communication is listening between the lines. People tend to leave out important details. So if you can weave pieces and parts together, then you know exactly what's going on. Our government is not going to unfunk themselves. It's actually our job. I totally agree. That's what the Second Amendment is for. Remember, yesterday we talked about the Puerto Principle. And remember, I said that if I had my way, I wouldn't want corruption to seep through. But sometimes corruption is an inevitable event. I think that the Second Amendment was a failsafe in case of corruption. So now, here it says in 1977, a Freedom of Information Act request uncovered a catch of 20,000 documents relating to Project MK Ultra, which led to Senate hearings later that year. Some surviving information regarding MK Ultra was declassified in July of 2001. In December of 2018, declassified documents included a letter to an unidentified doctor discussing work on 6 dogs made to run, turn, and stop via remote control and brain implants. Now remember, this was back in the 60s and 70s, and they already had brain implants. So what is Elon Musk actually doing? What is Elon Musk actually doing if back in the 60s we had brain chips implanted in dogs and we're using remote controls to control them? The CIA, to a lesser extent, the FBI are the prime example of what unchecked power, hands-off approach does. You have the people acting on their own and forming societies within these agencies. Absolutely. But when you understand that the government was formed by a secret society, then it makes sense why they would leave those loopholes for more secret societies to form. But I do agree with you, though, Ghost. You guys should read Behold a Pale Horse. You guys should read Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. You guys should read Dirty Little Secrets by Dr. Claude Anderson. So that's MK Ultra. Are we under MK Ultra? Are we dealing with companies and media that is programming us subliminally? Is that what's happening? What's happening? Why are things changing? Why aren't you allowed to talk about certain things? Consequences. I talk about consequences all the time. Why are consequences important? Consequences are important because they stop people from messing with you. They stop you from being bullied. They make things fair. But consequences can also be weaponized when they're used inappropriately. And when it comes to us, the United States and the government, they use consequences inappropriately. How do they know how to effectively use these consequences? You don't think they kept any notes from MK Ultra? Do you think those files actually got destroyed? Who were the researchers that collected and gathered all of the information, created all of the data, ran all of the experiments? More than likely psychologists and psychiatrists, because MK Ultra was an attack on the population's brain. So you needed people who understand the brain, neurologists, neuroscientists, psychologists, and psychiatrists to be able to run these experiments efficiently. There's a technique called operant conditioning. Has anybody ever heard of operant conditioning? You get operantly conditioned every day. When you go to work and you get there on time and you do your tasks, you get to keep your job. That's positive reinforcement. If you complete 40 hours one week and complete 40 hours the next week, then you get a paycheck. Positive conditioning. You bring your paycheck home to your family's happy because you can financially secure them. Operant conditioning. Positive reinforcement. Do you think that happens to us in the government with the media? Does the media operate and classical condition us without us knowing it through subliminal means? What are things that you're not allowed to talk about today? What are things that you're not allowed to post on social media about? If you run the risk of not being able to use your account because you got a strike, or if you have YouTube monetization and you publish a video and you're not allowed to get it monetized, is that operant conditioning with negative reinforcement? Is that classical conditioning? When you got spankings for misbehaving, is that operant conditioning? Classical conditioning? When the news and the media tell you to be nice, or they tell you to be accepting for something that you don't really feel comfortable with, and if you question it, you get canceled. Is that operant conditioning with negative reinforcement? What actually happens to you while you're watching TV? What actually happens to you while you're engaging in social media? It's changing you gradually. And most times you don't even know it. Weaponized positive negative reinforcement. That's what MK Ultra evolved to. Absolutely. Would you say that we see that currently in marketing, in media? They're now using MK Ultra tactics to get us to want to drink Coca-Cola, to get us interested in a news story, to get things to trend on Twitter. How much control do we actually have of our thoughts? How many of our thoughts are manufactured and we don't even know it? What is your biggest priority today? What information do you want to find out about today? Most people want to find out about information that has nothing to do with their sustenance. Why? Because your survival instinct has been deprogrammed. Operant conditioning is also called instrumental conditioning. It's a type of associative learning process through which the strength of a behavior is modified by reinforcement or punishment. It's also a procedure that's used to bring about such learning. So do you see this? Let's stop right here. Operant conditioning is a type of associative learning process through which strength of a behavior is modified. Do you believe that your behavior has been modified? I think that every human being has had behavior modifications. It's one of the reasons why we have spoken and written language. It's one of the reasons why we have a, quote, organized world. It's one of the reasons why we have the standards that we have. It's one of the reasons why we perceive each other the way that we perceive each other. Operant and classical conditioning, public receiving, reception, rejection, shunning, cancellation. In many cultures, people are encouraged to stay within their culture. When people leave those cultures, they can be shunned. Do I agree with that? No. But it happens. What do you call that? That's operant conditioning with negative reinforcement. Your society won't take you back if you go astray, or if you accept things that they don't want you to accept, or if you live a lifestyle that they don't want you to live. What about the government? What if the government has an agenda that it wants you to take? What if they want to do invasive procedures to you and inject chemicals in you? Will they create a situation and say that the only way for this situation to resolve is if you allow them to inject these chemicals in you? Then you say, I don't want to take these chemicals because I don't know what the hell it is. Guess what? You can't travel. Operant conditioning with negative reinforcement. See how that works? All these principles work together. You use a Hegelian dialectic situation like creating a problem where there is none, and then acting as if you have a solution, when the solution is actually a weapon to be used against people. And if those people don't accept the weapon being used on them, then they turn around and say, you can't travel. You get my drift? Although operant and classical conditioning both involve behaviors controlled by environmental stimuli, they differ in nature. In operant conditioning, stimuli present when a behavior that is rewarded or punished controls that behavior. Let's check that out again. In operant conditioning, stimuli present when a behavior that is rewarded or punished controls that behavior. For example, a child may learn to open a box to get sweets inside or learn to avoid touching a hot stove. In operant terms, the box and stove are discriminative stimuli. The operant behavior is said to be voluntary. The responses are under the control of the organism and its operants. For example, the child may face a choice between opening the box and petting a puppy. In contrast, classical conditioning involves involuntary behavior based on the pairing of stimuli with biologically significant events. The responses are under the control of some stimulus because they are reflexes automatically elicited by the appropriate stimuli. For example, sight of sweets may cause a child to salivate, or the sound of a door slam may signal an angry parent, causing a child to tremble. Salivation and trembling are not operants. They are reinforced by their consequences, and they are not voluntarily chosen. Do you guys think that we have been classically and operantly conditioned? Do you think that we deal with these kind of stimuli today? When do we deal with operant and classical conditioning? Indeed. I agree, Melanin. We issue operant and classical conditioning. We encourage with rewards and we discourage with punishment. It's not even creating a new behavior. It's just taking advantage of our natural needs. Consume, eat, reproduce, sleep, feel loved, accepted. They weaponized our own nature against us. Big facts. That's facts. Who would weaponize human nature against humans? It would have to be some kind of force that's unhuman. Food for thought. In contrast, classical conditioning involves involuntary behavior based on the pairing of stimuli with biologically significant events. You could cause somebody a heart attack. You could cause somebody a nervous breakdown. You could cause somebody high blood pressure or cortisol production. I have a question for you guys. Have you guys ever heard of the case of a man named Aaron Alexis? He was a shooter. He shot up a Navy gun yard in 2013. Some people believe that he was under the influence of MK Ultra. Other people believe that he was hit with extremely low frequency weapons. Regardless, this individual apparently had some knowledge that his brain was being attacked. He sought help for it, and they turned him away. Eventually, he went crazy and shot up the place. He was a black guy. There's a channel on YouTube, and it's called Truth Stream Media. The woman from that channel did an excellent video on that situation. If you guys get a chance, I'd advise you to watch it. It's actually kind of difficult to find. But I'm going to show you guys a picture of this guy real quick. This is him, Aaron Alexis. He knew he had some issues going on. And before all this happened, he went to a place, one of those places that counsels people that believes that they're being crowd targeted. They weren't able to help him. He ended up going crazy and shooting the Navy Yard up. The interesting thing about this case is that when they recovered his weapon, he had ELF carved into the gun. ELF, many people believe, stands for extremely low frequency, because he believes that he was targeted with those kind of messages. He said they put voices into his skull. And the voices were telling him to do things. And he couldn't resist the voices. They tend to do these kind of experiments on military people, older people, people in mental institutions, children. Illegitimate government. The thing that I found interesting was in the video that Truth Stream Media did, Melissa Milton, I believe is her name, she cited a bunch of different sources. I think one of them was the Washington Post. And the Washington Post actually mentioned the extremely low frequency weapons. They talked about microwave transmissions and being able to control and affect the weather. Oh, I thought that was just conspiracy theory. When the mainstream media starts talking about stuff that we talk about in these corners of social media, you have to ask yourself, well, what's about to happen? The United States government just did a UFO alleged disclosure. You have to ask yourself, what's about to happen? The CIA had this technology back in the 70s. Imagine what they have today. It's not hard to believe that they'd be instigating events like this to cause unrest and further division. Absolutely. Absolutely. Makes you wonder. All of the shootings. We've always had a Second Amendment right in the United States, and guns have always been for sale. What's causing the increase in gun violence? Is there an increased incentive to shoot people? No. A lot of times these people do these crimes and they say, well, I don't remember doing it. I believe that there's an element of lies to that. I believe that a lot of these people knew exactly what they were doing. But remember, there's an 80-20 principle, the Puerto principle. So there's probably a small population who actually don't. And regardless, if there's any population that don't remember, do we have to ask ourselves why? Why don't they remember? What happened? What caused this? What caused this person to snap? Was it some stimuli? What was the stimuli? Fire, what's good, bro? Are we subject to that stimuli? Have you ever seen images and things that just infuriate you? I think that the original MK Ultra was the N word. You guys may laugh when you hear me say that, but you don't laugh when you hear somebody else say the N word. The automatic response is anger, vitriol, violence, intolerance. Were you trained to react that way to that word? Absolutely. Were you trained to react this way to racism? Absolutely. We've been under MK Ultra before they even had MK Ultra. And they're tuning it up. They're making it worse for everybody. We've all been operantly and classically conditioned in our own way. And the dangers of operant and classical conditioning is when you're not thinking for yourself and somebody else is thinking for you, it makes you vulnerable. It makes you vulnerable to be taken advantage of. It makes you vulnerable to make bad decisions. It makes you vulnerable to be misled. None of those are situations that we need to be in. So now here it says, however, both kinds of learning can affect behavior. Classically conditioned stimuli, for example, picture of sweets on a box, might enhance operant conditioning by encouraging a child to approach and open the box. Research has shown this to be a beneficial phenomenon in cases where operant behavior is error prone. What kind of agendas do you see being put forward? Are there any agendas being put forward, or do we just watch TV with a clear message? Is there a certain direction that you see society being pushed to? Do you notice an unnatural progression towards certain things, towards acceptance of certain things, or towards engagement in certain behaviors? If you do, what are those things? Phases of operation. Phase 1, MK Ultra. Second phase, Stargate. Third phase, classified facts. So my question for you guys is, when you watch the media, is the message natural and organic? Or has the message been manipulated and is trying to steer you in a certain way? If you know the elements of classical and operant conditioning, if you understand that the United States government has done experiments on people since the 1950s, like MK Ultra, would that help you be more aware of what's coming out of your TV and going into your brain? Have you ever heard of voice to skull communication? Because that exists. You'd think that they'd use these kind of things to teach in school, concepts that kids couldn't understand. We'll use voice to skull communication so that they have it implanted into their brain. Teach them how to do calculus. Teach them how to do algebra. Teach them how to do geometry, trigonometry, coding. It's not what they do. They use this kind of stuff to control you. Why? Because you got to remember, in a system of illegitimacy, they tell you that you're independent while creating your dependence. What kind of people are independent? People that think, people that feel, people that read, people that question. If you deconstruct somebody's intelligence, then you have a bunch of drones. And if you have a bunch of drones, then you have a bunch of servants. And if you have a bunch of servants that don't know that they're servants, then you have a bunch of slaves. So there's another type of conditioning. We had operant conditioning. The next kind is classical. Classical conditioning. Have you guys ever heard of Pavlov's dog? Classical conditioning. Here it is right here. You probably heard about this in your psychology class. Pavlov's dog and Pavlonian. Classical conditioning refers to a learning procedure in which a biologically potent stimulus, e.g., food, is paired with previously neurostimulus, e.g., a bell. It also refers to the learning process that results from pairing, through which this neurostimulus comes elicit to a response, e.g., salivation, that is usually similar to the one elicited by the potential stimulus. It's like when you see the golden arches and all of a sudden you want French fries. It's like when you see a fizzy brown liquid pouring into a cup full of ice, you automatically want some Pepsi or Coke. Why? Because you've been programmed. Your brain is a computer. It can be programmed. Classical conditioning makes more sense for them to take advantage of because we need biological stimulation. We can't survive without it. We need to know where food is. We need to know when we need to breathe. We see things. We react to them. Our body is specifically made to have a biological feedback loop with the environment. It's one of the reasons why we have 5 senses. Classical conditioning interacts directly with our desires as well as our senses, and it operates on a subconscious level. If it operates on a subconscious level, then that means that you can stimulate somebody without them even knowing it. I can look at a green crayon and all of a sudden have a taste for peppermint gum. Why? Because they've associated that peppermint green color with gum for so long. They just go hand in hand. Most people, if you want French fries, it goes without saying that you need ketchup as well. Do French fries and ketchup go together? Who knows? Did somebody put them together? Yes. Did somebody package them for you for consumption? Yes. Did somebody make you believe that they go hand in hand? Yes. When you get hungry for French fries, do you expect ketchup without asking? Yes. If we go overseas, it would be the same thing with fish and chips. Go down south, same thing with red beans and rice. Operant conditioning. Do you think that the government uses this? Absolutely. Do you think that marketing departments uses this? Absolutely. Why do you think the news shows so much crime? Because fear causes a biological stimulation. These programming is often excused as culture, while real culture gets wiped away. There you go. That's big facts. It also refers to the learning process that results from its pairing, through which the neural stimulus comes to elicit a response, salivation, that is usually similar to the one elicited by the potential stimulus. Classical conditioning is a distinct form of conditioning from operant conditioning, through which the strength of a voluntary behavior is modified by reinforcement or punishment. However, classical conditioning can affect operant conditioning in various ways. Notably, classically conditioned stimuli may serve to reinforce operant responses. Classical conditioning was first studied in detail by Ivan Pavlov, who conducted experiments with dogs and published his findings in 1897. During the Russian psychologist's study of digestion, Pavlov observed that dogs serving as his subjects drooled when they were being served meat. Classical conditioning is a basic learning process, and its neural substrates are now being understood. Though it sometimes is hard to distinguish classical conditioning from other forms of associative learning, instrumental learning, and human associative memory, a number of observations differentiate them, especially the cognicities whereby learning occurs. The contingencies whereby learning occurs. Together with operant conditioning, classical conditioning became the foundation of behaviorism, a school of psychology which was dominant in the mid 20th century and is still an important influence on the practice of psychological therapy and the study of animal behavior. You don't think that they apply that to human behavior? You don't think that the studies that they do on animals, they do those studies on animals to then apply them to humans? If you don't think that, you might be being a little bit naive. So that's classical conditioning. Now, you might ask yourself, why did you just go through Project MK Ultra? Why did you just go through classical conditioning? Why did you just go through operant conditioning? Because I'm going to put an image up on the screen and I want you guys to tell me what you see. I want you guys to tell me what you think of. What do you guys think of when you see this? Cancer research ended up being used by assassins to inject cancer into targets. Prisoners were experimented on unbeknownst to them. Oh, absolutely. That's big facts. So, what thoughts go through your head? I want you guys to type into the comments what you think when you look at this image. What do you see in this image? What do you see? Is there something that automatically flicks in your head? What do you guys think of when you see that? Yo, Gary, what's good, bro? Good to see you, man. What images go through your head when you see that? And don't be shy. Modern day rainbow coalition. From Fred Hampton to this. Facts. Big facts. Especially big facts on the rainbow part. So, hey, what's up, Sanders? How you doing, bro? I want you guys to type into the comments what it is this makes you think of, what it is you see, what words, what phenomenon, what anything do you associate with this image? The whole entire image, from the word Vogue down to the actual picture. I see corporate power. Me too. Do you see an agenda? Yo, Jesse, what's up, bro? Good to see you, man. What's up with you? So, what do you guys see? Look at the colors. Look at the outfits. Look at the word Vogue. What thoughts go through your mind? Do you just put certain thoughts together automatically? I see fashion. This is definitely an alleged fashion show. I'm going to put another image up on the screen. Did you see that? Now, again, I don't have any issues with LGBTQ people at all. You have to remember that the government weaponizes all of us, just in different ways. So the question that I'm asking is, did you see this image when you looked at this image? Definition of Vogue: popular, exception, or favor. Yeah, facts. See how they did that? Look at the lights in the background. Look at the colors on the word Vogue. Operant and classical conditioning. Automatically associate these images. What do you automatically associate these images with? Why would they want automatic association? Because they're trying to condition your behavior. Each are a letter representation. Absolutely. You got it. The simplest form of brainwashing is repetition. That's big facts. So I want to show you guys this Vogue article because it's odd. Behold, a pale horse mentioned eliminating the population of blank and blank. You're right, it did. Absolutely. Through MK Naomi. So this is the hot hedonism and gentle tailoring, the men's spring 2022 collection. Now, if this is a men's collection, why would we put those images there? This is men's. This is not specific for those images that were put up there. Allegedly men. Men don't identify with those colors. So why would they associate those colors with men? What's being done? What behavior are they trying to change? What associations are they trying to make? Much like the fall of Greece and Rome, purposefully drowning in hedonism. Gary, I appreciate the membership, my brother. Much like the fall of Greece and Rome, purposefully drowning in hedonism never leads to a stable society. There must be a balance. I totally agree. I appreciate my man Gary becoming a new channel member. I'm telling y'all, the channel memberships is the best way to go. If you ever think about sending a super chat, hold that thought and join the membership. Join the membership and chat away. And with the memberships, once I get 10 members, I'm going to be doing special live streams for members only, as well as putting out members only content. So right now we got 3 members. We need 7 more, and then that stuff will start coming. So all my people that's members, I appreciate you. I didn't forget about you. I got you. Just need a couple more. Grow the family. Big facts. Big facts. And we will, and it's coming. Gary been around for a minute. So it's interesting, Ghost, that you mentioned that word, hedonism. This is what it says here. A quick search of my inbox pulled up at least a dozen press releases and reviews from the spring 2022 menswear season that the term hedonism was used in. Hedonism. We're going to stop right there. See how I got it highlighted? I'm going to show you guys a couple of these images. Suits are getting shorter. That's weird. I don't like that at all. Herbal remedies. Notice how this is green. You see how it's called herbal remedies? This outfit is green. Green matches with the herbal theme, right? Herbal remedies. Interesting. Skin is in. So we got this. Looks like he put his shirt through a lawnmower and it came out with a disfigured wife beater and he decided to put it on. Skin is in. Kinetic knits. This looks like a shag tie-dye camouflage sweater with candy corn jeans, leather pants or something. Who wears stuff like this? Who wears this? This looks like what those people wore in The Fifth Element. But then again, if you pay attention to The Fifth Element had vertical cities and it also had 3D printing. Images, operant conditioning, what's acceptable. They bombard you with this stuff from all over. A lot of times you've seen this and you don't even know that you've seen it. Gary said, what the F? Not the men. Yeah, man. Skirts and skorts are here to stay. That's a powerful message. What do they mean? Skirts and skorts are here to stay. This is a men's 2020, men's 2022. But they're telling you skirts and skorts are here to stay. Why would they tell you that? I'll go ahead and wear a skirt. It's okay. It's not going anywhere anyway. You may as well get used to it. Really? I don't think I'll ever be used to something like that. That's not a very normal phenomenon. Generations are getting softer and masculinity is dying, my brother. Yeah, that's big facts. I wouldn't even say go as far as to say it's dying. I'd say it's being killed. There's an assault on it. Something is wrong. Remember, we talked about that yesterday in yesterday's live stream. Mr. Anderson didn't become Neo until he realized that something was wrong. Looking at this article, and they're considering this as men's fashion, something is wrong. He looks ridiculous. Yeah, I totally agree. Definitely not my style. Some people may like it. I'm not a fan. What is this? Simple singlets replace tees. What in God's name is this? I don't even know what this is. You're on point. It's actually an assault. Oh yeah, facts, bro. I totally agree. It is big facts. Definitely an assault. This is actually a man. Do you guys believe that? Allegedly. I can understand the historical cultural piece, like the traditional Scottish kilts, but those were worn by a strong and hardened warrior who fought an entire nation for their freedom. Yeah, I agree. See, the thing is when it comes to that context, that in that society, in that culture, that's always something that men did. So it's not something different. It's not a switch. It's not an agenda. It's not a role change. And they didn't have MK Ultra and all of this other stuff bombarding them with images. It's just what they wore. This is what we wear. Like that one that was called Herbal. It's green. Well, in tribal societies, people wore green because they wore leaves and different things like that. It's not the same. So I agree with you again, Ghost. You're right. Look at his shoes. Unbelievable. I don't want to, like, apparently these have like more than one picture associated with them. I'm scared to look at the other ones. I mean, look at this. What is this? Who would wear this kind? Where do you wear stuff like this to? Where do you even wear? Where is this appropriate to wear to? More skirts. This is insane. This is literal insanity. Who wears stuff like this? I bet you these things cost thousands of dollars too. So they use the term hedonism. My question is, why? Why would they use that term hedonism? Yeah, who would wear that crap, bro? Who would wear it? Gender is being deconstructed. That's an excellent comment, and it's actually on point. BET Awards, I guess. Facts. You definitely would see some nonsense like that at the BET Awards. Definitely would. That's big facts. When they push forward these agendas, a lot of times they give clues. So we have to pick up the breadcrumbs and follow them. So let's do that. Now, Ghost over on Twitch. Oh, you got to leave, bro. All right, then, man. Yeah, man. I'll be around. I go live every day when I can. So I'll catch you tomorrow. All right. Be safe, bro. Good to have you in the chat. But Ghost had actually made a good comment up here. And I want to bring it back up. Because he says something real important. Let me see if I can find it real quick. See, he says, much like the fall of Greece and Rome, purposefully drowning in hedonism never leads to a stable society. There must be balance. Is that what Vogue is trying to bring forth with those new fashions? Hedonism? Remember in the first paragraph, that's what she said she saw. Hedonism. So we got to ask ourselves, are they trying to destroy society with this? Is that one of the reasons why this is being brought forth? So in order to figure that out, what we need to do is we need to look at the definition of hedonism and see exactly what's going on with this. Isn't it sexist and misogynist to have he in front of hedonism? Where are the We Too movement on this? I know, right? They'll soon get upset with this and call it shedonism, because God forbid a man be in front of the line. But I have to ask you guys an honest question. Do you believe that men caused a bit of the female backlash that's going on now? You Law, what's good, brother? The notifications have broke down as always. It's YouTube. Make sure y'all smash the like button. Make sure y'all share the video out. Help your boy out. Get them notifications out, because you know YouTube be straight hating. Hedonism. This is what Vogue wants to bring forth. Hedonism refers to a family of theories, all of which have in common that pleasure plays a central role in them. Pleasure, gratification. Didn't we talk about we live in the immediate gratification society? I do. Feminism was fueled by victims of powerful man. Yeah. In my opinion, feminism could be looked at as the gender version of critical race theory. At least the feminism talking points. Anytime there's a suppressive majority or a suppressive group, and there's a group that remains suppressed for a long time, when that group begins to crack the infrastructure, you have to understand that there's going to be an initial increased momentum, which appears to be aggression. The feminism stuff, it doesn't faze me. It's just a natural progression, in my opinion. Now, will people irresponsibly allow it to just completely overtake the way things are? That remains to be seen. But if you understand human psychology, then you understand the current state of feminism. If you understand how agendas work, if you understand how agendas work, the powerful few make agendas based on human behavioral progression. People see a large rising number of, quote, feminists. They're going to make society comfortable for feminism. We live in a system of illegitimacy. And in a system of illegitimacy, nothing occurs naturally. Everything is artificial. You have to understand that. Psychological or motivational hedonism claims that our behavior is determined by desires to increase pleasure and to decrease pain. Do you remember Pinhead? The reason why Pinhead had all of those pins in his head and why he had the leather coat that was stitched onto him is because he was a deity from some dimension where pain and pleasure existed simultaneously. That's what he was the embodiment of. Hedonism. Again, we live in an upside down reality where fact is fiction and fiction is fact. You can learn more about the real world by watching a horror movie than you can by picking up a school book. Normative or ethical hedonism, on the other hand, is not about how we actually act, but about how we ought to act. We should pursue pleasure and avoid pain. What do you guys think about that? We should pursue pleasure and avoid pain. Don't you think we pursue pleasure a little bit too much? Don't you think that we're becoming a little bit too sensitive to pain? Because there's many different kinds of pain. Pain can come with hard work. Pain can come with working out. We're too sensitive to pain, and the perceived need for gratification through pleasure is becoming a little bit too much of a necessity. Like Ghost said before he left, society is going into a downward spiral. Axiological hedonism, which sometimes is treated as a part of ethical hedonism, in thesis that pleasure has intrinsic value applied to well-being or what is good for someone. It is the thesis that pleasure and suffering are the only components of well-being. Again, immediate gratification. Why would Vogue push a clothing narrative that represents hedonism? They want pain to be the new pleasure in an upside down world. Big facts. Because if pain becomes the new pleasure, then you'll be begging for your abuse. These technical definitions of hedonism within philosophy, which are usually seen as respectable schools of thoughts, have to be distinguished from how the term is used in everyday language, sometimes referred to as folk hedonism. In this sense, it has a negative connotation linked to the egotistic pursuit of short-term gratification by indulging in sensory pleasures without regard of the consequence. Isn't that what we have right now? So what we have right now in the United States is a culture of folk hedonism. Folk hedonism. A technical term for immediate gratification culture. And as you can see, the clothing is symbolic of that. Vogue just evidenced it in that article in the first paragraph. Are there agendas? Is there subliminal messaging? Are our brains being attacked? So if that tells you that clothing can send a message, and we know that clothing can send a message because people wear certain colors to identify with certain neighborhoods, identify with certain gangs, identify with certain organizations, then we have to understand that there's an advanced form of this that's used to shape our behavior and used to shape our thoughts. How do you protect your brain from thought pollution? How do you protect your brain from thought toxins? How do you protect your brain from a DDS attack? That's the question that you got to ask yourself going forward, because unfortunately, they don't make antivirus software for your neurons. So we hear a lot about intersectionality in today's society. Why? Who talks about intersectionality? What's the purpose of it? Why do we talk about it? Why do we hear it so much? We hear intersectionality to bring together all of the misled agendas and make them find a common cause with each other in order to create a large pool of people. What do we use this large pool of people for? They're a market, they're a voter base, they're a population, they're an income source, they're taxes. They relate. It's a new culture. I'm intersectional. Are you intersectional? Everybody's intersectional. We did the Venn diagram yesterday. That's called mutual inclusivity. But now all of a sudden, a mathematical term has become a political term because it makes people feel good. Because it makes a way where people can unite. We can all unite under one agenda. They should have been trying to unite anybody. They should have been trying to unite everybody from in the first place. This is the United States, isn't it? Isn't this country allegedly based on unification? So now we're going to unite through our differences, and we're going to bond through one thing that we all have in common. I'm a black person, so I'm supposed to be, aligned with somebody who's LGBTQ because that's intersectionality. Intersectionality is a bucket of everybody who's not white or everybody who has some difference. Why? What's the point? The point is to actually create a melting pot and to create a confused and chaotic culture where nobody knows up from down or left from right. And everybody's identity is merged. And when everybody's identity is merged, then you don't have to pay attention to the specifics of each subculture. You only have to pay attention to the one distinct culture. And there's only one distinct culture who's not associated with intersectionality. Everybody else is just thrown into it. I don't have a black and brown coalition. I don't have a black and Asian coalition. I don't have a coalition with the LGBTQ community. But you will hear Tucker Carlson say that a million times. And just because he said it is true. You will hear Joe Biden say it a million times. And just because they said it is true. You have to understand that if you're watching something on a TV screen and it's being distributed by the government or a corporation, 9 times out of 10, it's not true. But the people that choose to believe those things and weaponize those messages know that, and they still choose to lie to themselves. Whose fault is that? The article that I had up from Vogue was intersectional. It had LGBTQ symbolism with males. So we're talking about, quote, male LGBTQ. Then we had white males and black males. I think there was also an Asian male. Intersectionality. Quote, see, we're all linked. Are we? Intersectionality. This is Joe Biden's favorite word when he can stay awake. Definition of intersectionality is the complex, cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination. See that? What did I just say? It's a bucket. It's another POC term that's being cultivated. POCs is another bucket that they use to dump non-white people in. Intersectionality is the same thing, but this is a more positive context because it's how we're all just supposed to be one big happy family. I already have a big happy family. I don't need another one. The complex, cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, classism, combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized individuals or groups. Who creates these groups? Who creates these margins? In a system of illegitimacy, these are manufactured. In a system of legitimacy, they occur statistically and naturally. There's no such thing as intersectionality. It's a political term. It's a marketing ploy used by the conservatives and the Democrats, used by the conservatives to get all of their anti-whatever vitriol out, and used by the Democrats to be able to get the money and support of these, quote, intersectionals. So that's what we're going to have now going forward. There's going to be a box that you can check if you're an intersectional. It's unbelievable the way they weaponize people and trick people and fool people. Now they can prosecute more people for hate crimes because they've created what's called intersectionality. We've created more minorities that aren't actually minorities, which means that we can prosecute more people for, quote, hating them. Which means that we can make more money through our illegitimate legal system. Bipartisan effort, as always. Intersectionality. Intersectionality is an analytical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities. Social and political identities. Notice this says nothing about race. What is a social identity? What is a political identity? It's how you're identified politically. That means politics identifies you. Politics, right-wing politics identifies black people as BLM, despite the fact that we're a race, they identify us as an organization. Politics, right-wing politics identifies black people as criminals, despite the fact that all black people aren't criminals. Left-wing politics identifies black people as idiots who can't get into college. Left-wing politics identifies black trauma in this country and divvies out justice to everybody else while doing nothing for black people. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't care what these organizations do, and I don't care what the politicians do. The only thing that I care about is how their actions affect me. And the problem is that in a two-party system of illegitimacy, both of those parties are there to affect me negatively. And more than likely, if you look like me, they're there to affect you negatively too. And if you look like somebody else, more than likely they're doing something to you too. Unfortunately, the people that look like me are dealing with the most. Intersectionality. I wonder if intersectionality is the same thing as Joe Biden saying, Black people, I'll always have your back. And then he tells Shakara Richards, now you shouldn't have smoked weed. Is that what having our back looks like? That's like being a friend and being a phony at the same time. So I guess Joe Biden's element of intersectionality is being a flake and being a president. The term was conceptualized by Kimberly Williams Crenshaw in 1989. Intersectionality identifies multiple factors of advantage and disadvantage. Examples of these factors include gender, caste, sex, race, class, sexuality, religion, disability, physical appearance, and height. This is where we have pretty privilege. Do you notice all of these come with some kind of privilege? There's gender privilege, there's male privilege, caste privilege, there's upper class, sex, again, male privilege, race, white privilege, class, upper class, sexuality, LGBTQ, allegedly, with the suppression, religion, Christianity, disability, underrepresented, physical appearance, pretty privilege, height, short men don't get anywhere in life. All of these things are associated with imaginary connotations behind them. Some of them based in fact, some of them based in fiction. These intersecting and overlapping social identities may be both empowering and oppressing. For example, a Black woman might face discrimination from a business that is not distinctly due to her race, because the business does not discriminate against Black men, nor distinctly due to her gender, because the business does not discriminate against white women, but because of a combination of the two factors. So basically what this is male-splaining their way out of racism. Oh, it's not because you're Black. It's not because you're a Black woman. So this is nothing more than a modified critical race theory. But what we're going to do is now we're going to distribute the elements of discrimination across the board to everybody. So now we can break this down and say, well, racism doesn't exist because it's two or more factors. I just don't like you because of your hat, Rob, and your shoes. See, that's why I didn't hire you. I don't like you because of your hair and because of your fingernails. I don't like curly hair. That's why I didn't hire you. So this is, again, critical race theory, more modified male-splaining about why somebody was or wasn't racist, when the fact remains that when people are racist, they're just racist. Racism has also been modified. There's a reason why certain Black males have more privilege than other people. There's a reason why certain Black women have more privilege than other people. Doesn't have anything to do with intersectionality. It has to do with the extent that they're willing to sell their souls to the system of illegitimacy and how bad they're willing to drag their own community for the benefit of themselves and everybody else. That's what it has to do with. It doesn't have anything to do with intersectionality. If somebody doesn't like Black men, they don't like Black women. The only people that don't like one or the other is Black men not liking Black women and Black women not liking Black men. Everybody else hates us equally. I hope you all wake up and realize that one day. Intersectionality broadens the lens of the first and second waves of feminism, which largely focuses on the experiences of women who were both white and middle class. Very sad, because there's other women. To include the different experiences of, quote, women of color. So that means that you're a serf in the system of peasants. White women get to get talked about as a specific topic. Everybody else, you're in a bucket. Women of color. Manufactured minorities. Why are people manufacturing minorities? So we can mail-splain how not racist we are. To include the different experiences of women of color, women who are poor, immigrant women, and other group. Intersectional feminism aims to separate itself from white feminism, acknowledging women's different experiences and identities. Intersectionality is a qualitative analytic framework developed in the late 20th century that identifies how interlocking systems of power affect those who are most marginalized in society. And it takes these relationships into account when working to promote social and political egalitarianism. Intersectionality opposes analytical systems that treat oppressive factor in isolation, as if the discrimination against Black women could be explained away as only a simple sum of discrimination against Black men and a discrimination against white women. Again, we all already knew this. We all already knew this. This isn't Black studies trying to figure out what's going on. This is the people that allegedly, the ones that created it, that don't know that they're doing it, allegedly, for them to explain how to do it, for them to learn how to do it, for them to modify their methodologies. And one of the ways that they're modifying their methodologies is coming up with crap like this. Because as much as this sounds like a way to, quote, explain discrimination, what it actually is a reason to excuse discrimination. I didn't discriminate against you because you happen to be Black. I discriminated against you because I don't like Scorpios and I don't like people that wear Prada. I'm sorry. I'll be taking the next application. Are you serious? In a system of illegitimacy, when people are attempting to make it look like they're not racist, they're actually the most racist. It's one of the reasons I ain't really had that much of a problem with Trump. That motherfucker just was who he was. Joe Biden is actually the motherfucker that's dangerous because he'll sit up there and feed you shit until your stomach is full. Criticism includes the framework's tendency to reduce individuals to specific demographic factors. It uses an ideological tool against other feminist theories. Its association with anti-Semitism. Notice how we're the pillar of racism here in the United States, and they mentioned us in negligible ways. Anti-Semitism, that has to do with Nazi Germany, despite the fact that anti-Semitism does exist here in the United States. It's not a pillar of United States society. The way that it's a pillar of United States society is that we fought against it in World War II. We practiced anti-Black racism as policy here, despite the fact that people who face anti-Semitism down talk and don't acknowledge that fact. Wikipedia is one of the best sites on the surface web. Yeah, I agree. Sylvia Sue, what's up? I don't believe that Wikipedia is by a Republican, just a regular creator. They need supporters too. Oh yeah, with Wikipedia, I think a lot of people from all over can put in. They can submit data to it. I think that's how it works. It's like a conglomerate type thing. They would rather change your mind about racism before they change their minds about racism. Yeah, or about them being racist. Big facts. Critics have characterized the framework as ambiguous and lacked defined goals. And as based on a standpoint theory, critics say the focus on subjective experiences can lead to contradictions and the inability to identify common causes of oppression. There you go. You think that's an accident? No. That's working in tandem. Intersectionality is working in tandem with the removal of critical race theory to completely erase racism. So we'll have this imaginary term that only delusional black people talk about. There's no such thing as racism. We've gotten rid of critical race theory, and now we have intersectionality, which just confuses the hell out of everybody. Intersection used to mean two streets. Yeah, big facts, MC Fact. What's up, bro? Good to see you. But without books, the digital world can be manipulated. Absolutely. That's big facts. The Democratic con job is no different than the Republican con job. It's one of the reasons why neither one of these parties are worth your support, because neither one of these parties are going to support you, because these parties ultimately support this system. If you remember from the article that we read about the founding fathers, the article that we read about the founding fathers talked about how this system was created under Republican and liberal common philosophy. So if that's the case, then that means that both wings in the political system won't fly you anywhere but into a wall. Do you want to fly into a wall? I don't. I used to support Wikipedia till I saw they don't check their facts. Yeah, they don't. That's true too. Kamala Harris removed her Wikipedia page the day she became VP. Has a new one auto-populated? Have they gotten a new one up there yet? So, you guys remember the Venn diagram from yesterday? I'm going to show you guys this Venn diagram from yesterday. All right. If I can find it on this share screen, let me see here. Yeah, here it is right here. The Venn diagram. I'm sure another will come. Oh, yeah, absolutely. What's good? Help me. What's going on, bro? The Venn diagram, that looks a lot like the intersectionality graph, doesn't it? Because it is. If you, this part right here where the mutual inclusivity is, this part here, this oval shape, that would be intersectionality. And I'm going to prove that to you. I'm going to prove that to you in 1 second here. Intersectionality. There it is. Do you see all of those ovals on top of each other? On those ovals on top of each other, it says an intersectional analysis. All right. And intersectional analysis considers all the factors that apply to an individual in combination rather than considering each factor in isolation. So what that means is the part that we will be concerned with here would be this part. This looks like a rounded diamond. That would be the part. Everything is twisted. Absolutely. MC Fact, you already know what it is. In this system of illegitimacy that we live in, everything is inside out, upside down, opposite, and inverse. So nothing is the way that we perceive it. Okay. That's the takeaway. All right. So I ran this a little bit longer than I expected. And I appreciate everybody for sticking around and watching. If you didn't watch the whole thing, make sure that you do. Share this bad boy out to your social media. Smash the like button. Drop your boy some comments. And I will catch you all on the next video. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. And hopefully I'll be dropping a couple videos today. But I just wanted to get that out. And I want to know what y'all think about it. All right. Peace.